Welcome to Perspectives with Asima Silva. We have Dan McKenzie again at this episode, continuing our conversation. If you joined us last episode, you will know that it was such a very moving story. A lot of parts, a lot of trauma. And we're talking about mental health and support and recovery. We had to stop at a very crucial point in his story, so we're going to continue from that point. He was sharing with us how he reacted at his dad's funeral.
So like I said, I was standing next to my brother. He was 5 years older than me. He was 18. This was probably the second time I met him. I had been to his country once when I was a baby, and so they had come up for the funeral, and they ended up staying here. So I guess this would be the time where I can say that now I had a new family member. My grandmother was here. I was able to build and connect a relationship with them, and they started to be this light at the end of this situation. At this time, my mother, she had raised us Christian, and I wasn't able to answer all my questions at a young age, and maybe I just wanted to be with my friends more than be in a Bible study. So by the time I was 11 years old, I had refused to go to church with her. And she was pretty okay with that for a while. And then one day when I was 13, she had somehow convinced me to go, put on this, pity party. Oh, you should go, and, I care about you, and this is it. So when I came home, after 2 years of not going to church, this is when she revealed that my father had been killed. And if you can imagine, I just left a church service that I had refused to go to and was talked into, and then I get this news that my father was killed. So it was almost like I took a step.
So you were 13, but you hadn't gone to church since you were
2
11?
years. Yeah, since I was 11. I was just, I don't know, I can't put my finger on it now what my motivation was to rebel at that young age. But what I do know is that it wasn't that I didn't believe in a creator. It was just that I couldn't understand the nature in my relationship to that creator. And if you could imagine, when I go to take a step closer to the creator and then come to find out that my father was killed, it even made that relationship worse. I had a very adversarial relationship. I knew that I would never go to church again. I would never pray again. So that's the way I lived my life. Not that I didn't believe, it was just with my cousin's murder, my father's murder, my aunt passing away so tragically from HIV that she contracted through a blood transfusion, I figured that on the day of judgment, I had more questions than he would have, and I would have to be judged based on the environment that I was brought up in. So that's the way I remained for a long time. And I went to school. My mother was such a Christian that she didn't encourage me to go to school, to college. Their belief was that the end of the world, the Armageddon, would be coming right around the corner. There's no reason to enter the world with education or chasing after a job or a career. But I decided that I would go away to school myself. I decided to leave Boston. I had experienced some other violent actions growing up as a teenager in the city of Boston. I looked down the barrel of a gun twice. I was robbed the first time at gunpoint at 13. Again, when I was a teenager, when I was delivering pizzas. And I say that my life's been a measure of inches, because I've actually had bullets go by me that would hit the concrete, and then I could feel the concrete ricochet on my face. So I wanted to get out of this environment. So I went to Rutgers University in New Jersey, and little did I know that every place, every urban environment is dealing with these same issues. You know, I got accepted to every school in Massachusetts, BU, BC, Northeastern, UMass. I did 3 schools out of state, Syracuse, NYU, and Rutgers. And I decided on Rutgers I couldn't go to New York City so soon after, you know, I lost my family members there. I didn't think that I was ready for that. But I did want to see something different. And my junior year, I had bought my mother a vehicle. She started her own catering company, family-run catering company. And my brother would work it, and my buddy and my sister. So one night, they were coming back from a catering job, and my brother fell asleep at the wheel, and he went off the side of the road. My best friend was in the front seat, and the divider went through him, went through his back, and came out the back. And my mother was in the middle of the van, and she flew to the front, and she's been disabled ever since I was 19. So I still had a younger brother and sister in high school. Their father was in prison for 7 years. So I had to leave school, and my mother was now disabled. So I had to leave school and come back and spend the time with my family and take care of the family. I had met my girlfriend at Rutgers, and when I came back, she attended college up here. And when I was 22, we had my daughter. So her mother and I, we didn't have a religion, but we felt that to raise a child, it's important to give them some sort of tradition and culture and history and moral values. So we decided to raise her in the Islamic faith as a Muslim. And the reason why we chose that religion was because it was the only religion I have had encountered that accepted all of the other prophets and messengers that were sent to different people at different times all over the world. Some of their tradition had been passed down through oral tradition, some of them had been recorded in books, and some were just lost to history forever. But we recognize some that we know the names of, and we also recognize different stories, cultures, and traditions as well. And I wanted her to have that because I didn't want to enforce or impose a dogma that wouldn't allow her to seek her own path when she was able to, and when she was able to question things and come up with things. So that is how I became aware of Islam, was learning it so that I could teach her. And it was very, basic as a child, just don't feed her pork, and but to learn the stories and the history and the culture. And what I realized the more I came to learn about it was that I already believed all the tenets. I already believed in angels, and I already believed in a creator, and I already believed in books and prophets and afterlife and destiny. But then the one other aspect was that I couldn't find any fault in it either. There was nothing that went against that I could say, I don't want to do that because...
So I'm going to be a devil's advocate,
Sure.
just to interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
So you said part of the reason why you knew you wouldn't go back to church is because the day after 2 years of not going back is the day you found out about your father passing away, right? Horrifically. What if you hadn't gone to church that day? Would it have changed your mind?
Yes. I mean, I was on the path of not having a relationship. If I hadn't not been to church in 2 years, somehow get talked into going this one day, and then come home to have my life completely turned upside down, it wouldn't have had the same impact on me. It would have, I could have rectified possibly that relationship. But at that point, I wasn't ready to. And so me just teaching her was it actually wasn't the cataclysm. What actually did happen is I raised my daughter as a single father since she was 4. Her mother went back. She was from Brooklyn originally, and she went back to New Jersey and left my daughter with me. And I had physical court-appointed custody of my daughter since she was 4 years old. And I had met another woman, both from Brooklyn for some reason. And this woman was also a devout Christian. She was raised, she was as a foster child in a reverend's home, so she was very, very devout. And she told me that she couldn't believe that she could be in this relationship with me unless we were going towards marriage. So she said, why don't you pray with me? So we did, and I prayed. This was the first time since I was probably 11 to 13, but within that span, I asked for guidance, asked for our unions to be blessed, asked us to make right decisions and for things to be easy. And then I came back to Boston and was riding around with my friend who had converted to Islam as a teenager, probably 13 years old, and he had been the one that kind of had taught me the things that I could teach my daughter, and he asked me to drive him to the mosque. And I drove him to the mosque, and he invited me in, which he did all the time, and I never went in. But this time I said to myself, how can I pray with this woman that I just met and not with my friend that I've been through everything with? I mean, this was the same person that was in the car accident with my mother when she was disabled and had the thing go through him, that I would sleep in the hospital with him for months until he had recovered, and pushed him in the wheelchair and watched him, go through the weaning off the medication that he had to take to go through all these surgeries. And so I went into the mosque with him, and he had me, wash my hands, do wudu, and my face and my mouth and my feet and my head and my arms. And then he said, you say these words, say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And so I said them, and then we went to pray. Because I knew that whether I prayed with her or I prayed with him, there's only one place for the prayers to go. They're all going to the same place, no matter which way you say them or what tradition you follow. So it didn't make a difference. If I was going to be praying, I might as well pray with him. So when we finished, he goes, well, you're Muslim now.
I was going to say, did he turn around and say, ha ha ha, now you're a Muslim?
He said, you're Muslim now. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you took the Shahada. You said those words, which is the testament that there's only one God and Muhammad was his prophet. And from, like I said, I was so okay with what I had learned from the religion that it was okay with me. So he calls our other friend. He says, hey, Danny's Muslim now. And his friend goes, what do you mean? You can't do that. He said, why? Why can't we do that? We just prayed in your father's mosque. And he said, no. He said, you have to have 2 witnesses. So he said, oh, well, what should I do? He said, well, bring them by my father's house in Roxbury. And it was probably 3 in the morning. And this is a very prominent figure, Abdul Badi, in Boston and internationally. And he came outside his home and told me the same things, the same beliefs, the same pillars, the same things to avoid that my friend had told me. So it was just kind of a revision yeah. of doing it correctly this time, and it stuck. So that has been a guiding force for me. And the other thing too that I decided about Islam is because I figured that if I do these things and nothing happens after you die, if I just lay in the grave and there's no afterlife, whatever tradition it is, there's just nothing more, and there was never a creator that I believe in, what did I lose? What did I lose by not drinking alcohol? Did a drunk driving accident? A fight in a club? What did I lose by praying when I was supposed to? Time that I would have been watching television, or things like that. So I just said to myself, I said, if these are what it takes to heal this relationship with the Creator that I knew was there, and take these steps and these phases, that it was something that I could live with, and it was actually a healing factor to now have this relationship. What I believe is that we all have this void that we're trying to fill, and you could fill it. You could try to fill it with money, or relationships, or substances, but it's only going to actually be subsided by having a relationship with whatever force, you believe in, whatever cosmic energy, entity that you come to understand. So, and the other thing is that I've been blessed that through my faith, I've been able to obtain a position where I work in service through I always believe that the only way you can turn negative energy and negative experiences into positive experiences by doing good work, by sacrifice. So there was a young boy that was shot in Bowdoin Street in Boston, and Mayor Walsh comes on the news the next day and says, "Oh, it's so sad that nobody marches, protests, or organizes when a little boy gets shot." And my first thought was, well, you're the mayor, why don't you organize something? And then my second thought was, well, why don't I? So within 2 weeks, we organized a bike ride from Dudley Square in Roxbury to in front of the State House, and we held a rally. And I didn't know this boy, but what had happened is him being hit by a stray bullet, he survived it, but he was on surveillance camera for 2 minutes, and nobody came to his aid. So when you watch the 7-year-old boy who was just riding his bike, you watch him fall off his bike and then roll around on the ground for 2 minutes before anyone comes to his aid, you start to think that sometimes the people that actually pass away, they have memorials, they get T-shirts made for them, people gather, people cry, but these ones that survive, they're still alive. They're dealing with physical trauma. They're dealing with the experience, the way that it could change their lives. And it's probably nobody calls attention to it. So while I was organizing it, the mother of the boy heard that I was organizing something on his behalf. And she contacted me. She said, this is really great what you're doing for my son. I'm going to ride the bike that he was on when he got shot at your bike ride. So it turned into this really big thing. And I guess that started my service, my life of activism. So when the Hurricane Maria happened, I had my best friend, she was a girl in high school. She ended up joining the military, and she went to war. She came back and became a doctor, and she moved to Puerto Rico. She opened up her own facility. She had other practitioners that worked with her. And when the first hurricane hit last year, she lost power to her home. And when the second hurricane hit, she lost power to her home, she lost her business. She had to relocate here back to Massachusetts. Fortunately, she was from Massachusetts originally, but her husband was born and raised in Puerto Rico. Her 3 children had been born and raised in Puerto Rico. So now you have a family that was used to having mangoes, in their front yard, coming back and being relocated in the middle of the winter. And what I came to find out through her was that all of the relocated families that went through the FEMA and the state agencies, they were placed in hotels. None of them were in Boston because the FEMA vouchers couldn't afford the hotel rates in Boston. So they were in Springfield, and Holyoke was the biggest concentration, New Bedford, Brockton.
Far away.
Far away, to commute or but they were living in hotels. And this had gone on for months, that all they could eat was hotel microwave food. People that came from tropical environments where food grew fresh every single day, now had no outlet. So we started organizing around that, and we had fundraisers, and we had one at the art gallery, and then one we had was at the Goodwill Employment Center in Roxbury. I had made connections with the Home for Little Wanderers and the Family Resource Center, and they actually paid to Uber all these 200 families that were spread out through Mass to come and have a dinner. And we had legal services for them. We had employment services for them, translation services. We had a meal. We had entertainment. And a woman comes, and there was one of the organizations that was my mosque, Masjid Alhamdulillah in Roxbury, and Imam Abdullah Farouk and the Islamic multi-service organization brought a truckload of food that these people could bring back to the hotels with them. And there was a woman there, and she started organizing things like, oh, well, if we put this here, you know, it'll be at the flow. And I didn't know who this woman was, but she comes to me and she says, I was asked to come introduce myself to you. Somebody thought you might be interested in a position that I have, and I asked her what it was, and she said it's the Director of Outreach and Programming for a Disaster Relief Refugee Agency. And they also have women's transitional homes for homeless women and children, and medical clinics that can do on-site medical screenings, and food banks, and food pantries. And so when she said that, I said, you know, this is what I've been waiting for. You know, this I can actually do now full-time what I've been doing on my own.
Right.
You
now
know,
you can do it with some structure.
It was some structure. I had no business card. I had no 501c3. I had no office or, you know, anything like that. So, you know, when I would go in and try to organize and form, it's just like, hey, I'm Dan, you know, I want to do this and make people believe in me. But now I had an organization that's been around for 50 years
right.
Behind me. And so that was another blessing. And like I said, I've used self-sacrifice, giving, as my form of healing. It wasn't taught to me. It was just something that I felt instinctively that was going to be the only way to get all this experience and be able to overcome it and be able to turn pain into power. So I really have to credit my path through Islam.
So I want to go back for a second,
Sure.
and I know we only have a few minutes left, but
Sure.
you had said that, you know, you were exposed to death in many different forms with different waves with close family members. Now, when you said that, you know, you knew there was a creator, but you had a lot of questions to the creator than maybe the creator would have had for you.
Mm-hmm.
When you found Islam, how did you reconcile that part of your life?
I think I just realized that there's things that I'll never understand, that is not for me to understand, that we as humans we don't have the senses, we don't have the time. We're here on this earth for maybe 80 short years. And in that time, what I found by having a daughter is that we're here to use that time to take what we were given, whether it was a little or a lot, and just add some more onto it, add some more positive things onto it, and leave that for the next. And that, you know, our eyes can't capture all the spectrum of light, and our ears can't hear all the decibels of sound. So how can we expect to understand things that move in different realms and different... But
how do you think you tackled, I'm sure, as a child,
mm-hmm.
or at least as a young adult, going through all of this,
mm-hmm.
you must have had anger and pain. How did you, you know, overcome that, or at least not overcome it, but handle it? I know you mentioned that you used to cry yourself to sleep. But I'm just asking, in the few minutes that we have left, that, you know, with people who are going through trauma, who may be in similar positions as yourself, who have a lot of hatred and anger with the experiences that they have had, for, be it to God, or be it to an institution that, like, for example, nightclubs or alcohol or whatever they're taking it out with, what would you say to them as advice?
I think really, honestly, the one thing that helps me deal with my experiences is knowing that it's not the worst. I know that I'm not a child soldier in Africa that was picked from his country and given a M16, and I'm not in a freight container being shipped across the sea to be a sex slave, and I'm not in prison for 30 years for a crime that I didn't do. And that if these are the things that we have to deal with, I guess the second part of that is not just that I'm not the worst off, but that also that my experiences may have prepared me for something. They may have, you know, and maybe it's the work I'm doing now. I don't feel that yet. I struggle with understanding what that is, and I want to believe that my experience prepared me for nothing, and it wasn't just for anything, for a role that I'm supposed to play, or even not maybe be a main character, but have some kind of impact. Maybe the butterfly that flaps his wings. And
well, you never know. This story that you're sharing, someone may hear it and find inspiration.
Exactly. You know, I would love it to be my daughter and something I imparted on her, or maybe it'll be something she imparts on somebody else. But, you know, I recognize I come from a long lineage of experiences of pain. You know, my father escaped Honduras, you know, which we know was probably in the 70s was even worse than the conditions that people are trying to escape from now. And you know, his people was a lineage of indigenous people that had been wiped out, and also people that had made it over the transatlantic slave route. So if I'm just like I said, I don't put so much emphasis on my presence. I know that I'm just a piece. I know that I'll have a beginning and I have an end, and my part here is to turn something that might have been negative into something positive. And like you said, maybe somebody will hear the story and say, the other thing I don't want you to discount is I still hurt. You know, I can't say that I might have a job, you know, I might have a good relationship with my daughter and my mother, but we have to recognize that people have to live through pain. They live with pain, and they try to find joy and pleasure where they can, but I don't think we can really just say, oh, you know, everything's in the past and you don't have to deal with it. I think about things all the time. I'm going to be spending time with people this week that are memorializing a loss that they had in their family, you know, and I said, I'll spend that time with you so that, you know, we help each other get through things. And as you know, you went to the Bronx with me. You know that community has memorialized this tragedy that happened with these 87 people in a monument there in the South Bronx that they keep. You saw the fresh flowers.
Yeah, that was still there.
Yeah, that are still there. They keep them there. It's wrapped inside the iron gate that people respect.
And on that note, we're going to have to wrap up, but I think it's a great note to end on, that there was a monument to honor the victims that is still standing there today with fresh flowers. And I think it's a symbol, as Dan said, to everyone who is living, who are survivors or who have survived family members, that, you know, really pay respect to such these horrific incidences. But another thing that we learned from this story is perseverance. And the trauma is always there, but there's a way around it. And as I think Dan said it perfectly, taking pain and putting it to power. And I really thank you for sharing your personal story, because there's so many lessons that we all can learn from it. If you think about every blip he said in terms of who he lost and how he felt, just remember that was years worth of that couple of seconds that it took for him to say. And that couple of years worth of pain he has turned into service and giving back. Thank you for watching with me, and hope you join us again at Perspectives.